Hi, this is Laura Holyoke, and I have a PowerPoint for you covering the structural lens. So our first lens in coping with ambiguity and complexity in organizations. So as a starting point, if we look at organizations, organization development and how we're reading it, these are all problems that can happen in organizations and all problems that can be addressed through organization development. So looking through a structural lens, structural lens illuminates the non-human aspects of an organization. So I need to warn you that from here on out, things get confusing. Anytime you add humans to the equation, it just gets complex. So metaphors for structure include a form or a blueprint, the design of an organization, the architecture, framework, linkages, and even foundation. So the structure, what we see through a structural lens is the most rational and visible manifestation of organizations. You can think of structure as a set of building blocks. They're necessary to make organizations look legitimate. And these are the formally sanctioned expectations and exchanges, i.e. the policies and how to proceed sort of rules that are set up in an organization. You need pieces of structure to build an organization, and most often when we're thinking about restructuring an organization, structure is looked at first and is usually the easiest of changes to make in an organization, although it may not seem that way. So structural elements of an organization. If you can think of an organization through a structural lens through a clock analogy, that organizations are supposed to be efficient machines with replaceable parts that function in an orderly way to accomplish goals. If you think about all the intricate pieces of a watch, you know that they all have to work together, and certain things have to happen at certain times, and certain parts of the watch have certain functions that they need to carry out. So organizational design, goals, vision, mission, and plan define what an organization is trying to accomplish, and these are all part of the organization structure. And then how the work is divided among people is one of the issues that we're going to talk about, as well as Bowman and Deal addresses, and the coordination of the work that needs to be done in an organization. So every organization will have differentiation and integration. So differentiation addresses the division of labor. In other words, who does what in the organization, how to allocate that work. And then integration is also coordination of efforts. So when the what gets done. If you can think of even a family as a most simple organization, we have to find an arrangement that works. If we have one bathroom and 5 people, if the what gets done or showers in the morning, then when do people, how do you decide on who goes first or who needs more time than another one? That is an example of differentiation and integration. So who does what and what gets done? And we do this all the time in our family systems. Coordination can be both vertical and horizontal. So vertical coordination refers to the levels of authorities, and then the rules and policies that are usually conducted from top down, and then the planning and control systems. So we're going to talk about those a little bit here. As well as lateral horizontal coordination talks about that doesn't talk about anything, but it refers to meetings, task forces, and networks within an organization. Here's the first org chart in terms of hierarchy. A lot of people start with an organization chart, and that is a part of structure in organizations, but it is not nearly all of it. So I'm going through most of this quite quickly because Bowman and Deal also address most of these pieces, and I'll let you know when I come up on some that they don't address. So Bowman and Deal talk about core processes, that every organization has a core process. And so in order to do this, organizations have raw materials, which are also called inputs. The technology is actually the activity that is performed on the inputs in order to get outputs. And the outputs is the product that an organization puts out. So it gives you, I think, goes over McDonald's and Harvard in terms of inputs, technology, outputs. But you can look at any organization, let's say the University of Idaho, the inputs, if we're looking at students, the inputs are ignorant students, ignorant people, I guess, and I'm not using ignorant in a bad way, but the technology or the activities that we do are to educate these individuals, and the outputs are educated students with degrees. So another way to put this, I think I just walked through this. Inputs and outputs. So inputs are raw materials. What happens inside the organization is called technology. So if you wanted to use a spin on the word technology, you can use it in this way. However, organizations have two kinds of technologies, core and support. So core technologies answer what an organization does, what everything is hinged on. It produces a product. Support technology, you'll know something to support when the external environment gets crazy. The organization will buffer core technology first. So if you think about when some sort of budget crisis comes along, what gets cut first from an organization? And that is usually support technology. And all supporting technologies have their core. So here's an example. If you would look at higher education institutions 50 years ago, within any institution, it provided all the food that was on campus. It provided housing. It provided their own maintenance, lawn care services kind of thing. However, through the years, higher education has come closer to just supporting its core technology, research and teaching. And you can see how the support technology, things like, I'm not thinking of who we have right now, but Marriott does all of our food stuffs on campus. And I think we still have all of our facilities and maintenance, but many other higher education institutions hire that out through contractual work. So if you think about the Marriott Corporation, they have a core technology, and that is food and catering and offering what's here on campuses. So that's what is meant by all supporting technologies have their core. So Charles Handy studied this a little bit, and he, in his book called The Age of Unreason, he called this a shamrock organization, and talked about all larger organizations going to a shamrock kind of structure, if you will. So just like what I talked about before, that the core workers will stay, and that will be buffered. And then there will be a contractual fringe, so that the idea that the organization will contract out things that are not supportive of its core technology. And then the flexible workforce are the idea that other things can come and go. It may depend on the season. It may depend on something that's happening and will not be long-term. So I went through that pretty fast. I was hoping I did not have to do a second PowerPoint, and I'm not, so I'm going to keep cruising along. So structural imperatives, these are straight out of your Bowman and Deal book, and these are, I think, all pretty well self-defined. That the idea that as size and age of an organization grows, the complexity and formality increases. The core process and technologies must align with the structure. The environment, a stable environment, you have a simpler structure. Uncertain or turbulent environments bring about more complex and flexible structures. So you can look for these structural imperatives as in your ensuing discussions, where you see them around you, what organizations are older and larger, which ones are smaller, and can you see the structural imperatives in them? Can you see any of this in The Devil Wears Prada? So structural tensions, and this is, again, straight out of Bowman and Deal, the idea of differentiation versus integration. As organizations grow, they need more sophisticated and costly coordination strategies. And here are some that I think all of us can relate to in terms of our organizations. Sometimes there's a gap in what people do and somebody's not picking up something, or there's an overlap and people, two different people are doing the same thing for the organization. Underuse of some individuals or positions versus overload, a lack of creativity versus a lack of clarity. Do people know what's required of their position? Excessive autonomy versus excessive interdependence, too loose versus too tight, goal-less versus goal-bound, irresponsible versus unresponsive. So again, where do you see these? Where do you see them in your own organizations? And where might you see them in the Devil Wears Prada? So something that Bowman and Deal do not talk about, just like the Shamrock organization, are organizational boundaries. And this gets into the teamwork that they start to talk about in the first section that you read, the structural section. But it's the idea that organizational boundaries are fluid. And how do you know if you are in or out of an organization or a group? Because boundaries determine who is in or who is out of the organizational family system. And a boundary is defined as the skin, if you will, that contains the organization and distinguishes it from the outside environment. So William White, in his book, or I think it's like white papers, if you will, called The Incestuous Workplace, talks about organizational boundaries. And specifically on what he addresses is ends of one continuum with two ends, right? So on one end of the continuum are organizations with open organizations with very porous boundaries. And here's what you can see in these kinds of organizations, that there's no clear sense of mission or goals, that ideas and values that people come up with tend to leak out of the organization. They're not owned within. High levels of rationalization and low levels of disclosure and intimacy. That is, people don't know what others' strengths are, they don't really talk a lot, and they rationalize when something comes up. Compartmentalization of work that results in low levels of internal interaction and interdependence, just like the above. Invisible organizational members who have retired on the job, but they've retired on the job mostly because all their job responsibilities have been removed. There's also low levels of organizational identity. These are people that may work for some place but don't say, "Go Vandals." Absent or sporadically involved leadership. So these are very low boundaries, very open and porous. On the other end of a continuum are characteristics of enmeshed or closed organizations. So, as you would think, opposite of porous organizations. So low boundary permeability, very aggressive gatekeeping functions for ideas to get in or out. There's extreme demands for loyalty among people that work in these organizations, and excessive demands for time and emotional commitment to the organization. They define where you're going to spend your time and how you're going to spend it. These organizations are very conservative, defensive, reactive, and resistant to change. You'll find that there's a focus on groups rather than individual activities and achievements. There's minimal internal boundaries that provide access to things like private space. The management style or thinking is that workers must be controlled by fear, force, or charismatic persuasion. You might see something like this in The Devil Wears Prada. And then control is provided through tyrannical, authoritarian leadership or through manipulated consensus. Harsh response, very harsh response to behavior that deviates from the norms that have been identified in this sort of organization. And I'm going to run out of time here, so I'm going to come back and record a part 2 for you. Thank you very much.